This week, the Supreme Court provides DACA recipients with some breathing space as Congress continues to try and find a legislative solution.
She stroked his pretty skin again and kissed and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite.
And as President Trump talks about snakes, my guests from South Carolina talk about leadership.
Immigrant populations represent the future of the American church. If it's going to be sustainable and grow and vibrant, sure, the white churches might be dying, but if we can incorporate our brothers and sisters who look differently than us, they can revive a lot of what has been lost in the white American church.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani with Only in America. So the Supreme Court refused the Trump administration's request to leapfrog the lower court and take up a case coming out of California. But something to keep in mind, the case is not questioning the merits of the program or whether or not the administration can end DACA. The case at hand is simply asking whether or not the administration ended the program the right way. And all the Supreme Court did was say the case needed to be reviewed by the Circuit Court before the justices would consider a decision. Bottom line, the uncertainty and anxiety are still out there for dreamers and their loved ones, and we still need a legislative fix. Keep in mind, the next few weeks are absolutely critical. Congress is back in session with less than 4 weeks until the next must-pass legislation, a March 23rd appropriations bill. There are a lot of ways this can go well, and DACA is attached to the appropriations bill. Or, well, there are a lot of ways this can go badly. Stay tuned. Meanwhile, with all the things in the news these days, President Trump is working really hard to keep DACA in the headlines. Over the last week, the tweeter-in-chief has sent a number of missives making the case Democrats do not want to fix DACA, but Republicans do. Curious. I think there are two reasons why President Trump may be doing this. One, the White House is preparing a new proposal to put on the table. Or two, as we get closer to the end of the program, the president realizes he will be to blame for the firings, detentions, and deportations that will come with the end of DACA. His latest reading of the poem The Snake at the Conservative Political Action Conference last week offered, to put it mildly, little encouragement that the White House is serious about a solution. In fact, the daughters of the poem's original author, the late singer-songwriter Oscar Brown Jr., were compelled to go on cable news. Maggie and Africa Brown accused the president of twisting the poem's meaning in order to create a climate of intolerance and hate.
It's a political agenda that deals with separatism, racism, sexism, and it's the kind of thing that's polar opposite to what Oscar Brown Jr. was about.
Finally, a little nugget from the movie of the moment, Black Panther, which I saw over the weekend and I highly recommend. In fact, the soundtrack has been on repeat for at least a couple of weeks. So as impressive and empowering Black Panther is for the community, its message about migration rang true. So I'm not going to spoil the movie, but I will offer you these few lines from T'Challa. Now more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe. I'm Ali Noorani. Coming up, a husband and wife planting churches and educating students in South Carolina.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
Meghan and Derrick Smith run an educational organization in South Carolina called SC Test Prep. In Spartanburg County, where Meghan and Derrick live with their 4 young sons, only a fifth of adults hold a bachelor's degree. So their organization prepares thousands of low-income and first-generation college students for standardized tests and offers extensive college counseling. And as Southern Baptists, Meghan and Derrick have also embraced multi-ethnic worship. They began our conversation by telling me about the experiences which formed their beliefs.
Your listeners should know that Meghan was raised in Quito, Ecuador, and so sort of had an outsider's vision even when she arrived here in the early years of her high school career. And I, being a thoroughbred Spartanburger, experienced like an eye-opening culture shift when I studied abroad in France as an undergraduate. And then together we've traveled abroad many times since then. But I think that when the opportunity came to sort of stay within our realm of Southern Baptist life and culture while also branching out into the realities of foreign missions within our local context, that's our definition of missions, is crossing a cultural boundary, not necessarily a geographical one, with the gospel of Jesus. And so we were able to do that in our own hometown. And it was just a no-brainer, sort of pioneering work, frankly, in America at the time. And I think the future is bright for multi-ethnic worship in the United States.
Why do you think it's bright? Give me unpack that a little bit for me.
Well, we believe that the Bible is true, and from the very beginning that it's not a coincidence that God moves people around the earth. I mean, in Acts 17:26 and 27, Paul's preaching to the Areopagus, these philosophical elites in Athens, and he's reminding them that from one man, Adam, God made all the families of the earth, and that he predetermined the times and boundaries where they should live. And to me, what that means is that God ordains human migration. And when you think about it in Scripture, he always has. He's the one who sent Adam and Eve out of the garden. He's the one who cursed Cain to wander the earth. He's the one who lifted Noah and his family, in the flood and moved them. And he moved Joseph and he moved, et cetera, all the way down to Jesus, who himself was a refugee from Bethlehem to Egypt. Paul says in verse 27, why? It's so that people will grope for God while they're away. And so for us, it's a very natural time in someone's life to be groping for God when they're outside of their normal cultural context. And the same has been true for me in my own life.
But I think also when you look at statistics, you hear a lot of people talking about how the American church is dying and how people are leaving the church in droves. But that only paints one side of the picture. That's looking at usually white churches. But Spartanburg's demographics over the last 20, 30 years have changed drastically. And our immigrant populations now, a lot of them are already Christians, whether that's families coming from Mexico or refugees that we've had resettle here. And they are coming and plugging into churches, planting new churches, growing them. So I think immigrant populations represent the future of the American church. If it's going to be sustainable and grow and vibrant, sure, the white churches might be dying, but if we can incorporate our brothers and sisters who look differently than us, they can revive a lot of what has been lost in the white American church.
And I'll say this too. We read the end of the book, and at the end of the book, all nations and tribes and peoples and languages are around the throne praising the Lamb. And so it's normal and natural to be that way now. Even if it's difficult, it's worth it.
Was there a moment where you said, we've operated in the faith context, how do we, I don't want to say apply that, but expand that to helping young people advance their own education dreams?
Sure. For me, it's about access to truth. And I think there's a lot of people in Spartanburg County who are in poverty who really can't see out of their own kind of shell of their lives. And for me, as a first generation college graduate in my family, experienced that when I was able to study abroad in college. And I just want people to be able to decide what they want for their own lives, have options and opportunities. And, what we say as an organization is that we believe that the most accessible way to an economically stable future is through an undergraduate degree. And so, yeah, we put our faith to work in this, although secular, nonprofit.
Could you talk a little bit about South Carolina Test Prep?
Sure. We're a 501c3. In short, we think that every student deserves access to the economic stability provided by an undergraduate degree. And as a public school teacher in Spartanburg County for 7 years, helped a lot of different kinds of students, but saw that many were falling through the cracks, and it had a lot to do with their financial situation. The SAT and ACT are standardized, but they are not fair. They were self-report on their own economic and ethnic biases, and what that means is it's not a level playing field. And we together seek to level that playing field in terms of access to opportunities in college.
Some of the things that we do as an organization is test prep, preparing students for the SAT and the ACT, both to help increase their opportunities in admissions and in scholarships. We take students on college visits. We help families with the FAFSA. We have life skills workshops where we talk to students about some of the realities that they'll face once they transition into college, like drugs and alcohol, and how to plan a budget. What is credit cards? How do you change your oil? What is consent? And all sorts of different things so that they enter college prepared, not just academically, but socially and culturally as well.
Okay, so then how, in your experience, you had experiences in the faith context, now in the education context, how do these questions of faith, of education, of culture fit together in a place like, Spartanburg, where, on one hand, the region was built on the prosperity that came with textile mills, and now the region is manufacturing BMWs?
I think as our demographics change, it means that the people that you're sitting next to in a classroom have changed, and it means what the student you teach looks like has changed as well. So I think that our school systems are almost that first point of contact as families from across the city, across the county come into one building and learn how to work together, play together, eat together, have recess together, etc. And teachers and other staff and people who work in the school systems get to know their families. And I think that's the first point that you have adults and what Spartanburg used to look like kind of start to grapple with, well, this is our community now, and how do we move forward in both educating and supporting these families and what Spartanburg looks like now and beyond. Because a conversation that Spartanburg is having a lot now is about retaining the best and the brightest and attracting a diverse workforce to fill the jobs that we have here. And that's where a lot of the DACA conversation has centered around for us at SC Test Prep and in different avenues and places here in Spartanburg is we look at the dreamers that are here who have been educated in our community, have been on our kids' soccer teams, sit next to us in church, are just as Spartanburg as anybody else, and yet they can't really plan for their future because everything is so uncertain. And so I think as those relationships have been built across time and across the years, it turns a very divisive political conversation into a personal one.
Well, I would say this. When you think in a faith context, it's not a coincidence to me that I would call another Christian a brother or sister in Christ. That is to say, we're family. And so you're right. When different cultures and spheres of influence bump into each other, there is static and friction and tension. But when it's within a family context, whether that is a faith community or the city of Spartanburg or the county of Spartanburg, we've all, I think, done a decent job at moving forward together.
But it's also not easy. I don't want to push too hard, but there are certainly moments of tension. And how do schools and churches in Spartanburg navigate that tension?
I definitely see the anxiety in our students, both for our students who are American citizens, but their parents are undocumented. I see that anxiety. For example, we had a big celebration event for some of our students. It was held at the library, and all of the families were invited to come and honor the hard work of that their students had done. Well, one of my students whose parents are undocumented came up to me and she said, "There's a policeman in the lobby and our parents are all outside. They're afraid to come in. Is he here for them?" And it was something I never even considered, but we always have a policeman at the library who just monitors security. But just his presence made them afraid to not even come to their own students' event. But we were able to talk to them and they came and it was okay. But that anxiety was very real for them.
So in this moment where you've got, a Trump administration, you've got DACA under a lot of, there's a big question of whether or not DACA as a program will continue. Congress in this massive immigration debate. How is that playing out for your students who are, Latino, may or may not be DACA recipients, but also for other students as they've gotten to know them? I mean, I think that gets a little bit to your point, Megan, of these relationships that start to be built, whether it's among youth or between families. But how is this immigration debate playing out in your community?
I'm really encouraged about the future of the upstate. And I think that's because we have leadership, both at the government level, the local government level, leadership in our educational institutions, in our businesses, who believe that diversity is not a problem to be dealt with, but is something to be embraced and is an asset to us as a community. So whether that's in the intentional efforts that some of the colleges that we work with are making to recruit more Hispanic students, or whether that's our chamber who's also making more intentional efforts to attract diverse populations to come live and work and play here in Spartanburg. I think when becomes a normalization in the words and the conversations that we have about immigrants, that can trickle down. But then we're also having conversations on the very one-on-one level that can change things. South Carolina, we're still a very conservative place. I don't want it to make it seem like we're this, super progressive place that accepts everybody. We have to have those hard conversations, but those are happening. And some people are willing to listen. And as we kind of wait and work on the DACA issue, those stories are becoming more and more prominent in our newspaper and in social media. The dreamers that we have here have been extremely courageous and brave in sharing their stories. And I really see that moving people's opinions on the issue.
Yeah, I think the future is bright. From what I'm seeing, it feels to me like there's politically more and more pressure in Congress and in our General Assembly to do something to help, whether that is merely, making it to where DACA recipients could be certified, say, to teach or to be a nurse, or the in-state tuition for undergraduate. Stuff like that can be changed and fixed. And I think it's a lot to do with faith culture meeting business culture, as well as law enforcement, kind of all together to say, look, this is a thing that together we can all accomplish.
So last question for you. As you know, the podcast is called Only in America. So for both of you, and I certainly hope you have not prepped to answer ahead of time, because that would be cheating. Complete this sentence, only in America, ...
Oh, wow. Only in America can a infant be brought to a place like Spartanburg, South Carolina, and be met with both trying times, but also hope that was probably incalculable to their parents as they came here.
And Ali, I've been a podcast listener from the beginning. And so I did know this question was coming, and I have thought a lot about it. And most of your guests offer very eloquent, beautiful answers. But I'm going to go with something super pragmatic and something that I think is true from traveling the world and seeing different cultures, that only in America can you get free refills at a restaurant.
Wow, there it is.
It is something uniquely American, isn't it? All right, and then in that case, we got to do one more question because so I'm always like really interested in, or I shouldn't say always, I've become increasingly interested in how immigration intersects with broader American culture. And there's a gazillion different ways of defining what does culture mean, right? So you can define it through faith, through art, through any of a number of ways. But for the two of you, what is the most powerful intersection of immigration and American culture?
Well, I mean, Spartanburg County and our neighboring Cherokee County together, I think, produce more peaches than all of the peach state of Georgia. And so just, again, practically speaking, like the food that we eat, probably for most every meal, some of it has been touched by the hands of immigrants. And that, for better or for worse, is where I go for that question.
I think, Ali, you've done a really great job of writing things about how immigration and culture intersect, whether that's on our Major League Baseball teams and how when people, talk about their players and their team, they're not talking about someone from El Salvador or Venezuela. They're talking about their Astro or their Yankee. I think also with the Olympics just ended. I think our American team was a beautiful representation of how immigration has made us stronger as a culture, as a competitive Olympic team. I think about a movie that all of us have been watching lately, The Black Panther. I think that's a very American creation that has sparked lots of conversations, has earned lots of money at the box office, and is a beautiful and powerful representation of immigration and how different cultures grapple with the questions that immigration causes us to question. But it also shows the rich diversity and strength that immigration can bring, even just to us at the box office, at a movie, whether or the music that we listen to. I think art is a really powerful way that conveys the strengths of immigration and how it can make us stronger as individuals and as a culture.
There's an entire podcast episode that I want to do in that movie. Now, that's a different episode. So I really, really, really want to thank both of you, Derrick and Meghan, not just for joining the conversation today, but for everything that you've done in South Carolina. It's been just a real pleasure to get to know you two, your boys, but your respective parents, your families, and I'm always looking for a reason to come and visit. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you, Ali. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, come on down. We'll fire up the still.
Meghan and Derrick Smith are the leaders of SC Test Prep in Spartanburg, South Carolina. There's more on their lives, their faith, and their work at immigrationforum.org. And while you're there, subscribe to Only in America. That's it for this week. Only in America is produced by Megan Wetmore and Emily Chow. The executive producer is Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali Noorani from the National Immigration Forum. See you next week.